Hello everyone. So, in our last episode, we left Murat Reis, and the Corsairs, historical showband anyone? Because that's a brilliant showband name. Murat Reis and the Corsairs. Anyway, we left them on the shores off the coast of Ireland. Now, I want you to imagine yourself asleep in Baltimore village, or town, Tuesday, 20th of June, 1631. 2 a.m. and it's dark, pitch dark. Not the streetlights and screens so-called dark of later centuries like now, but literal blackness. In that pitch black silence, your senses are heightened. Every fallen leaf, every snapped branch, echoing like gunfire in the Baltimore night. For reasons that we made clear in the last episode, the air smells of dying fish and drying fishing nets. However, that peaceful scene does not last. At that very same moment, the Corsairs have disembarked from their Man-o-War and Polaccas and are swiftly and practically silently rowing the 150 yards to shore, hidden under the cover of an almost otherworldly sea haze. As you're awoken, you notice a smell. The smell of burning. The reason is that, unbelievably, a band of Algerian or Moroccan Corsairs, that is, pirates, have attacked. To take you back to a third-person view, the attack is being led by a Dutch renegade named Jan Janzoon, who we met in the last episode. You mightn't remember Mr. Janzoon, simply because he had moved to Algeria purely as a business opportunity, converted to Islam, and so taken the name Murat Reis the Younger. He had actually, in his short time in the North African coast, become the very first president and Grand Admiral of a city-state known as the Republic of Saleh in modern-day Morocco. Now, this wasn't just a pirate camp. It was a sophisticated, independent city-state that declared independence from the Sultan of Morocco. Janzoon wasn't just a captain. He was a diplomat who negotiated treaties with European powers. Shortly before this promotion, his Dutch family, including his wife and children, actually travelled to the Dutch port of Veer in 1622 to beg him to come home, but he refused. As any shrewd businessman would, he became active in what was essentially the equivalent of a gold rush, Barbary Corsair warfare, and, crucial to today's story, slave markets. By the time he landed on the shores of Baltimore, the man known as Murat Reis, which is the name I'll use from now on, had already built a reputation for long raiding. In 1627, he conducted an almost identical raid, even further north. In fact, his Iceland raids are used as a model for later attacks, most notably for our episode, Baltimore. Just a point of interest, it just so happens that the raid in Iceland is also on a community of interlopers, in that they are part of a Danish settlement in Iceland. Similar to Ireland, Iceland was under Danish occupation at the time. And the community are also mainly Protestants. In the Icelandic case, however, they are Lutherans, not Puritans. The diary of a Lutheran pastor, Reverend Oliver Egilson, is pivotal in understanding the thoughts and feelings of the people in such a raid, and the aftermath, as not much survives regarding the Baltimore captives. If we again go back to the events in the build-up to the raid, we get a clear idea of the tactics employed by Murat and his men. Firstly, again just to note, many historians believe that the raid in its entirety was far from a random Dutch African guy turning up on the edge of Ireland, and there are many theories which we'll get to in a future episode. So, look forward to that. If you remember from the last episode, the Corsairs used local knowledge and captive pilots to navigate effectively. Mr. John Hackett, the Dungarvan fisherman, was aided by an English captive, Edward Follett, who was noted for his seafaring skills after being taken from a large ship out of Dartmouth, England. Also, we'd better not forget that Mr. Hackett was the one who told Murat Reis that their initial target of Kinsale would have been too heavily guarded, and to go for the sitting duck of Baltimore instead. This invaluable knowledge would have been impossible to get if he didn't use his pre-capture capture, so to speak. Murat and his men also rely on deception and speed. That is why, on the 19th of June 1631, they lie just a few hundred yards, and to quote some of the sources, literally a musket shot away, from the shore, shrouded in suitably ethereal conditions of fog. Remember as well that Baltimore has a distinct reputation as a pirate haven. As we heard in the last episode, this reputation has even reached the ears of the Venetian ambassador, so it's highly likely it had also reached, at some point, the shore of Algiers. Anyway, back to the raid. The boats are led by a 300-ton Dutch-built Man-o-War ship, captained and piloted by the aforementioned Murat Reis. It has 24 cannons and a crew of around 200 men. Nothing like it has ever been seen before on the shores of Baltimore. But there's a reason for that. The man-of-war ships are deep-bodied, built for broadside war engagement, not navigating the jagged coastline of southern Ireland. Such a ship would be unwieldy and, to be honest, impractical on the shores of Baltimore. For that, he'll rely on his Polacca. This is also known as a Polacca and is a way smaller boat with 3 masts. This type of ship is used by Mr. Reis so much that it in time will become known the world over as the ship that Murat Reis used. If you wonder where the name comes from, it's the Italian for Polish. These are small, square-sailed, shallow boats, making them perfect for places with lots of low shores and twists and turns. Essentially, Reis ends up using his man-of-war as his headquarters and prisoner camp, and his Polacca as the transport vehicle. Now here, the sources say, he stopped his ship in the haze a musket shot from the shore. But that means that one shout, one cough, one sneeze, with the wind blowing the wrong way, and their cover would be blown. Now we get to the tactical genius of Murat Reis. Instead of sending all his 230-ish soldiers to rush the shoreline, he first sends a small scouting boat, something like a lifeboat, to the shore. And it's not like Mr. Reis is letting his cronies do the dirty work while he sits back. He actually goes on this search mission himself, along with 10 of his crew and, crucially, the captain from Dartmouth, Edward Follett. Interestingly, and maybe it's a hint to his heritage, Follett shows a deep familiarity with the layout of the coastline around Baltimore. He's able to tell Reis where the largest amounts of plunder would be, and also, crucially, where the people with guns, who would be potential resistors, live. Is this and Hackett's cooperation malicious or fear-based? We'll never know, but the 21st century thought seems to lean towards the latter. Anyhow, they make their way back to the cove, confirm that Follett was indeed telling the truth, make mental maps of the different paths and stuff like that, and head the 2 kilometres back in their little boat to report to the waiting Corsairs. If you're wondering why they went 2 kilometres and didn't just go 150 yards, not all places are suitable for landing small boats like theirs. The entire crew have a meeting in which they decide who's taking what route and with whom, decide who will be the leaders of each group, and then, likely with a prayer to their god, they get into those small little rowboats, head towards shore, and set foot on the sand of Baltimore, County Cork, Ireland at 2 a.m. And, well, you'll just have to find out next week. Thanks for listening. Like this if you can. Tell me what you did and didn't like. Follow me on Instagram at LeanBlakePodcaster, and, most importantly, tell everyone to listen to the History and Heritage podcast. Bye!